As an athlete, would you say that you give more attention to the mental side of the game or the physical side of the game? If you're like most athletes, you give most of your attention to the physical side of your game. And that's okay. And it's honestly expected. I mean, the physical stuff is more in your face and tangible. It's really easy to go practice your shooting form or go take some cuts off the tee. It's a lot more difficult to train your confidence or to work on your focus, for example. Or at least it seems that way. With physical training being a lot more accessible and a lot more focused on during practices, it makes sense why athletes are going to give more attention to it than the mental side of their game. But just because you give more attention to it, does that mean that it's more important? So does that mean then that the mental side is more important? No, that's not what I'm saying either. In fact, I think looking at it this way is a problem in and of itself. Instead of thinking of the mental side of the game or the physical side of the game as more important, I want you to see both as equally vital ingredients to you reaching your potential as an athlete. Hey there, I'm Eli Straw, mental performance coach and the founder of SuccessStartsWithin.com. Now you can have all the confidence in the world, but if you can't hit the broadside of a barn with a fastball, you're probably not going to go very far as a pitcher. Likewise, if you are an absolute sharp shooter from beyond the three-point line in practice, but then you experience intense nerves and fears in games, those skills are not going to translate and you're going to find yourself underperforming during games. With me being a mental performance coach, you may expect me to come out and say that I believe the mental side of the game is so much more important than the physical side. But as I said in the introduction, I think that creates a problem in and of itself. Now, when you split it up into the mental and the physical parts of your game, you actually begin to separate yourself, taking an either-or perspective. Instead, through my work with athletes, I've realized we need to take more of a harmonious view of you as an athlete, seeing the athlete as a whole, and then recognizing the physical and the mental parts of your game as just that, parts. Two parts that must work together to help you perform your best, and also to help you have a healthy mindset in the process. By taking this sort of approach, we can actually make true progress. Because we can improve confidence, for example, without taking the physical side of your game into consideration. And drills used to improve certain mechanics, they're not going to be of much use if you have poor focus, for example. So we want to combine the mental and the physical part of your game when it comes to training and then when it comes to performing. By doing so, your training is actually going to become more effective and your performing is going to become more natural. When we stop taking an either-or approach, we are left with the job of simply helping you train to become better. This means using both mental and physical training tools and also training techniques to help you improve. And I think this helps counteract one of the most common challenges I see in relation to the mental side of the game, thinking that mental skills cannot be trained. When an athlete doesn't have their physical technique down just quite yet, they're going to work with a coach on applying drills to help them improve. But when it comes to an athlete not having high confidence yet or good skills in relation to calming their nerves going into a game, it's easy to see this as something that can't be trained. They either have it or they don't have it. That couldn't be farther from the truth. I've seen many athletes apply mental training tools and have mental skills improve as a result of applying those tools. By recognizing the importance of training both the physical and the mental side of the game, you as an athlete will take a more proactive approach to mental training, just as you're taking a proactive approach to your physical training. This is where we see you finally begin to put it all together, and then you perform well in games, just like you're performing in practice. So now how can you work on developing both the physical and the mental side of your game? Remember, we are after a strong combination of the physical and the mental side of your game. This means that you need to be giving attention to both in order for them to really work together to help you play your best. What I'm going to do now is break down a strategy that I use when I'm working one-on-one with an athlete in mental performance coaching to help you make sure that you're training your physical skills well enough, and then also helping you incorporate mental training into the mix. So first, let's start with using routines to train physical skills. I'm going to guess that right now you are training your physical skills a lot more than your mental skills. So you may not feel like you honestly need to be doing anything in this regard to your sport. But what I want you to think about is how consistent have you been recently with your training, and how much attention have you been giving to the really small details that you actually need to work on. Have you been coasting through training, or have you been pushing yourself and working on your weaknesses? As an athlete, you want to make sure that you are always building upon your strengths, but you're also working to improve your weaknesses to turn them into strengths. That's what this strategy is going to help you do. So what you want to do first is identify your strengths and weaknesses. You want to make yourself a list of both your strengths and weaknesses, and then go into as much detail as possible. Now, depending on yourself and your personality, it may be more difficult to identify one versus the other. But I want you to take your time and get as specific as you can about what right now are strengths in your game, and then what right now are actually weaknesses. And then the next step is to choose your drills, because once you have your weaknesses and your strengths listed out, you want to choose specific drills and exercises that you're going to use to train them. You want to be sure that you are still building upon your strengths while you are working on your weaknesses. You don't want to forget about your strengths, or you run the risk of having them turn into weaknesses themselves. Now, when I say drills, this is a general term meaning the way in which you will actually work on improving a skill. There may be a few different drills that you're using or a few different training techniques that you use, but the goal of this step is for you to get clear on how you will actually work on your strengths and how you will actually work on your weaknesses. And then the third part is where you're going to actually create a training routine or a training plan for yourself. Now, to make sure that you are training the physical side of your game as much as possible in terms of specific and focused training, you want to be consistent with routines. These routines are going to help you be consistent because they make sure that you are training on a regular basis. By creating a training routine, you can feel confident that you are focusing on all the small aspects of your physical game that you know are going to lead to more success for you on the field or court. For your routine to be effective, you need to take the first two steps as seriously as possible, and you really need to think about them carefully. But if you have come up with a good list of your strengths and weaknesses, and then you've also chosen solid drills that you're going to use, you can feel confident that your physical training routine is going to ensure you are as prepared as you can be in terms of your physical skills come game time. Now let's move on to training the mental side of your game. As you're training your physical skills, you want to make sure that you are combining this with good mental preparation. This means training your mental skills in a very similar way. By doing so, you can feel confident that both your physical game and your mental game are going to be working together to help you perform up to your potential. So what you want to do first is check for any mental blocks that might be present. This is going to be very similar to identifying your strengths and weaknesses. You want to check to see if there are any mental blocks or mental game challenges that are holding you back. Now, mental blocks are patterns of thinking or mental states that are limiting your performance. Here's a list of the main mental blocks that you might be facing as an athlete. We have sports performance anxiety, the fear of failure, we have poor focus, negative self-talk, perfectionism, self-doubt, and then also social approval. Now, sports performance anxiety is when you are overly worried about what may or may not happen. And for the most part, your worries are going to be focused on not wanting to make a mistake. That's why this is often seen accompanying the fear of failure, because the fear of failure in sports is defined by you being afraid of what's going to happen if you make a mistake. So you're afraid of that consequence. And then poor focus is when you have a difficult time controlling what you're actually focused on during practices or games. Now, with poor focus, it's going to be easy for distractions to pull your attention away from the present moment. And then perfectionism, as it sounds, happens when you demand yourself to play perfectly. This makes it difficult to focus on the process and focus on the present, and it also makes it difficult to bounce back from mistakes during games. And then negative self-talk involves unhelpful or negative thoughts. These can occur at really any time during the game, but they're most often felt before, during, and after games, and especially after mistakes during games. Negative and unhelpful thoughts will make having confidence very difficult, which is why if you have negative self-talk, you will also likely experience self-doubt as well. And then with social approval, this means that you are trying too hard to gain the approval of other people and get them to recognize you as a good player. This means your confidence is too reliant on the people around you. Now what you want to do is you want to work on proactively training mental skills. If you recognize that any of the mental game challenges that I just outlined are impacting you, then the next step is to focus on building more positive mental skills. When you develop stronger mental skills, mental blocks and mental game challenges go away. For example, if you are dealing with a lot of sports performance anxiety, by building the skill of calming your mind and then also increasing your confidence, anxiety is going to be reduced. Think of this in a similar way to training your skills. You know how you chose specific drills that you want to work on to train your physical skills? You want to do the same thing when it comes to training and developing mental skills. There are going to be certain tools that you can use to train the different types of skills. And so what I've done is I've linked right here to a video that goes into more detail on the different mental skills that you want to work on and you want to train, and then also the mental training tools that will help you build those mental skills. And then the last step is you want to create a mental training routine for yourself. This is where you're going to create a routine much like with creating a physical routine. When it comes to both physical and mental training, I love routines because of the consistency that routines instill. One of the common factors with any kind of training is repetition. You cannot get highly skilled, whether this is going to be in terms of your physical game or your mental game, without repetition. You have to put in the work to develop the skills. A routine helps to make sure that you are putting in the necessary work, and you're not even just putting it in, but you're doing so on a consistent basis. With your mental training routine, you want to take the tools that you chose in the previous step, and you want to decide when you're going to use them each and every day. With mental training, a great time to implement your routine is in the morning or in the evening, simply because it's the easiest time to piece together this routine that you can be consistent with. So here's an example of what maybe a good mental training routine might look like for you. So in the morning, I might say that I'm going to do some self-reflective writing, 10 minutes of mindfulness meditation. I'm going to repeat some self-talk, then I'm going to do visualization for 5 minutes. Now, in total, this routine should take about 20 minutes. That's it. That's not much of a time commitment to make sure that you are developing a strong mental game. And when you work on building a strong mental game, and this goes along with a strong physical game, you are doing all that you can to help yourself reach your full potential as an athlete. Because remember, it's no longer a question of which is more important to athletes, the mental game or the physical game. They are both simply two parts that combine to help you become the best player that you can be.